There are many famous destinations in Europe, and several deserve their fame. Barcelona, Paris, London, Amsterdam, and so many others are full of people and cameras pointing everywhere. But when you stray a little from this itinerary, you discover another continent. Hidden villages, slow life, empty streets, and stories that almost no one tells. Have you ever imagined a place where the sun rises twice in the same day? What if I told you that there is a Spanish village with 7 residents and 9 bars? Today, on Bello Mundo, we are going to travel through 11 little-known European villages, full of history, silence, and surprises. And if you stay until the end, there is a special bonus. Number 1. Fuggerei, Germany. We begin our journey in Germany, more precisely in Augsburg, a city about an hour from Munich. And that's where there's a village that seems to have been stuck in the 16th century. Its name is Fuggerei, and it is considered the oldest social housing complex in the world still in operation. The village was created by banker Jakob Fugger, one of the richest men in Europe, to provide decent housing for poor workers. And believe it or not, even today the rent remains symbolic, a little over €1 per year. That's right, a whole year paying the equivalent of a small bottle of water. And that's not the only thing that remains the same. The benefit comes with a rule that has been in place since the beginning. Those who live there must pray 3 times a day for the soul of the founder. It is an ancient tradition and still part of the agreement. Another curious detail is the curfew. The gates close at night, and if someone arrives after hours, they must pay a small fee to the guard to enter. It's not a big deal, but it shows how some medieval rules have simply never been repealed. Fuggerei was bombed in World War II, underwent reconstruction, and withstood 5 centuries of change around it. And yet it continues to function as a real village with real residents, living within a model created long before modern Germany existed. Number 2. Civita di Bagnoregio, Italy. Leaving Bavaria, Germany, we now head to the interior of Italy. It is there, in Lazio, about 2 hours from Rome, that one of the most fragile and at the same time most impressive villages in the country is located. Its name is Civita di Bagnoregio. Civita became known as the Dying City, and this nickname is not without reason. The entire village is built on a cliff of volcanic tuff, a type of rock that crumbles easily. Every heavy rain, every landslide, and every gust of wind wears away a little more of the city's foundation. Streets have disappeared, houses have collapsed, and part of the hill has simply crumbled over the centuries. Today, Civita has very few permanent residents. The most recent records indicate about 12 people living there year-round. And the most curious detail is that, even with so few people, the village has more cats than inhabitants. There are about 12 residents and 20 cats sharing the same isolated cliff. Getting into the village is no mystery, but it does take some effort. You have to cross a narrow bridge almost a mile long that was built because the original path simply disappeared. Cars can't get through, ambulances can't get through. Everyone arrives on foot, and even with so few inhabitants, some traditions remain strong. On Good Friday, for example, there is the procession of the Holy Cross of Bagnoregio, a centuries-old ritual that spans generations. The ceremony originated from a legend from 1449, when a pious woman prayed daily before the crucifix, asking for an end to a plague that was devastating the region. Until one day, according to tradition, she heard a voice saying that her prayers had been answered. Shortly thereafter, the epidemic ceased, and devotion to the crucifix became part of the village's identity. Number 3. Theth, Albania. Continuing our journey, we now enter the Balkans to visit Theth, a village hidden in the mountains known as the Albanian Alps. It is an isolated valley surrounded by peaks so high that for decades it was almost impossible to get here, especially in winter. Because of this place has become a perfect refuge for those seeking silence, nature, and that feeling that the whole world has been left behind. The valley attracts hikers and nature lovers, but one of the most famous spots in the region is the Grunus waterfall. From the center of the village, it is about a 30 to 40-minute walk. The trail is peaceful and passes by stone houses, open meadows, small bridges, and rocky stretches. In the end, the landscape makes up for it. The water plunges from a narrow gorge in a drop of almost 98.43 feet, forming a very cold, natural pool, typical of the altitude. But death is not just about the landscape. The village preserves something rare in modern Albania: traces of the Kanun, the ancient traditional code that regulated life in the mountains. It defined rules for hospitality, marriage, inheritance, and even blood feuds. It was an oral law created many centuries ago which determined the rules of coexistence when the state did not yet exist in these mountains. The best known and most tense aspect of this code is Gyakmarya, or blood feud, in which families could enter into long cycles of retaliation. Today, this hardly ever happens, but the tradition has left deep marks on the region. And that's where one of the most curious places in this village comes in: the Tower of Reconciliation. For centuries, it served as a shelter for men involved in family rivalries until a peace agreement was reached. Incredible, isn't it? Number 4. São Brás de Alportel, Portugal. Our next destination is the Algarve, a region in southern Portugal that almost everyone knows for its beaches. This is where those famous photos of Benagil Cave, the Golden Grotto that dominates travel pages on social media, come from. But away from the busy coast, there is a completely different Algarve, hidden inland. And that's where São Brás de Alportel is located. The village is small, quiet, and full of white houses with colorful details typical of southern Portugal. But what really makes São Brás stand out has nothing to do with the beach. The village is considered the Portuguese capital of cork, and that's not just a title. Much of the cork used in wines, handicrafts, and even modern products passes through here. The region is surrounded by sobreiros, the cork oak forests that produce the cork. Extraction takes place every 9 years and has followed virtually the same method for centuries: manual cutting, great precision, and care with the tree, which continues to produce for over 200 years. Walking through the village, you can see how this has shaped the place. Old workshops, small family factories, and museums dedicated to cork help explain why São Brás grew up around this activity. The local economy still depends on it today. It's a little piece of the Algarve that almost never appears in travel photos, but should. Number 5. Gimmelwald, Switzerland. Everyone at some point has dreamed of visiting Switzerland, whether for famous cities like Zurich and Geneva, for chocolates that travel the world, or for ski resorts that appear in movies and winter advertisements. However, far from this well-known itinerary, there is a Switzerland that goes unnoticed by most people, and this is where Gimmelwald comes in, a village hanging in the Alps. The village is located in the Lauterbrunnen Valley, a region surrounded by stone walls and high waterfalls that plunge from the mountains. But what makes this little corner so special is the fact that it has resisted being transformed into yet another ski resort. While neighboring villages have been equipped with hotels, slopes, cable cars, and spas, life here has remained simple. Cars are not allowed. There are no wide roads or modern buildings. The only way to get there is by cable car, And when you disembark, you feel like you've gone back decades in time. Wooden houses with flowers in the windows, old barns, open pastures, and a silence that only appears in truly isolated places. The small village has about 130 permanent residents, almost all of whom are involved in alpine agriculture. In summer, the cows climb to higher pastures, and their bells can be heard throughout the valley. In winter, everything slows down even more, and the village is left with practically only its inhabitants. This little piece of the Alps ended up attracting attention precisely because of this. It is one of the last Swiss villages that still maintains the old way of life, far from the glitz of the big ski resorts and close to the landscape that made the country famous. Number 6. Gasa de Lour, Faroe Islands. From the warmth of the south, we go straight to one of the windiest corners of the North Atlantic. Almost everyone has heard of the Faroe Islands, that archipelago lost in the North Atlantic that belongs to the Kingdom of Denmark. They are known for their giant cliffs, unpredictable weather, and also for grindadrap, the traditional whale hunting ritual that generates debate around the world. It is a territory of extreme landscapes and ancient customs, where life follows its own rhythm. And it is precisely there that one of the most isolated and photogenic villages in the archipelago is located, Gasadalur, on the island of Vagar. Surrounded by mountains so high that the sun took a long time to reach it in winter, the place lived in almost complete isolation for decades. Access was only possible via steep trails, and residents had to cross the hills on foot to receive mail or buy basic necessities. This difficulty left its mark. In the early 2000s, there were just over a dozen people living there year-round. It was only in 2004 that a tunnel finally connected the village to the rest of the Faroe Islands. A huge change for those who live there, but one that did not take away the feeling of isolation. The symbol of the place is the Múlafossur waterfall, which plunges from a cliff directly into the sea. It appears in photos from all over the world, but the village remains small, quiet, and surrounded by grass roofs and sheep roaming freely. Number 7. St. Kilda, Scotland. In the far northwest of Scotland, there is an archipelago so remote that for a long time many people doubted its very existence. It is St. Kilda, a group of isolated islands more than 99.42 miles from the mainland, surrounded by huge cliffs and an unforgiving sea. For centuries, a small community lived there, practically disconnected from the rest of the country. Families depended on fishing, a little agriculture, and mainly the harvesting of seabirds. It was such an important practice that the residents became experts at climbing vertical cliffs to capture fulmars and geese, something that had impressed travelers since the 18th century. But life was hard. Storms isolated the island for weeks, ships were unable to approach, and diseases brought by visitors wreaked havoc. By the early 20th century, there was no longer any infrastructure to continue. In 1930, the last 36 inhabitants asked the Scottish government to be relocated. The houses remained there, intact, with utensils and furniture scattered about, as if the village had been interrupted in the middle of the day. Today, no one lives there permanently. The area is managed by the National Trust for Scotland and only welcomes researchers, military teams operating a radio station, and a few authorized visitors. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, both for its natural beauty and for the historical record left by its former residents. Number 8. Piodon, Portugal. After crossing part of Europe, we return to Portugal, this time to the center of the country, more precisely to the Serra do Açor. It is there, hidden between steep slopes and sharp curves, that Piodon is located, one of the best-known historic villages of the so-called schist villages. The first impression is surprising because everything in the landscape is made of the same material, from the houses to the streets, and even the small staircases that connect one level to another. The shape of the village was born out of the need to adapt to the rugged terrain of the mountains. The houses were built at different heights, creating an irregular design that has become the trademark of the place. Schist, for those who don't know, is a dark stone typical of that region, which gives the village a unique look, especially at dusk, when the light spreads across the facades and gives everything a more intimate feel. Life there has always been marked by isolation. For decades, reaching Piodon was difficult because the road was narrow and winding. This ended up protecting the village from renovations and preserved much of its original architecture. To this day, the place remains small and quiet, with just over 100 permanent residents. A curious detail is the whitewashed Mother Church, which contrasts with the dark tone of the houses. It has become the great symbol of the village and shows how, since the 18th century, even a remote territory needed a central point for the community. A discrete place organized in layers of stone, which follows exactly what the mountain allows. Number 9. Rupit, Spain. The next destination is in northeastern Spain, in a mountainous region of Catalonia where small medieval villages are still part of the landscape. Among them is Rupit, a village built on huge blocks of natural rock. For those who need a reference, it is about 55.92 miles from Barcelona. The charm of the place lies precisely in its rugged terrain. The houses are lined up on narrow slopes, irregular stairways, and passages that seem to have been molded by the stone itself. Old balconies, small windows, and facades from centuries past show how the village has preserved a style that has disappeared from the rest of the region. The entrance to the historic part is via a wooden suspension bridge that sways slightly when someone crosses it. It has become a symbol of the village because it creates a curious transition between the modern world and the medieval area, which remains virtually intact. The surrounding landscape helps to understand why Rupit has gained fame among nature lovers. Near the village are the Single de Taverte, huge sandstone walls formed by erosion over thousands of years. They create natural viewpoints overlooking deep valleys. Following one of the trails in the region, you will come across the Salint Waterfall, the largest waterfall in the commune, where a river plunges from a high cliff and forms an impressive curtain during the rainy season, a piece of rural Catalonia that has remained discreet despite being close to one of the busiest regions in Spain. Number 10. Rainy, Norway. The next destination is in the far north of Norway, within the Lofoten Islands, an archipelago known for its pointed mountains, narrow fjords, and fishing villages that look like natural works of art. Among these islets lies Rein, a small place that has become a visual reference point for the Norwegian Arctic. The village spreads across small islands connected by bridges and surrounded by peaks that rise straight out of the sea, creating an almost vertical landscape. The red houses that many people recognize are rorbuer, old cabins used by fishermen since the 19th century. Some still serve the fishing industry, while others have been adapted, maintaining the original structure that marks the identity of the region. The economic base has always been the fishing of Arctic cod, called skrei, which migrates to Lofoten in the winter. Because of this cycle, local life follows the rhythm of the tides and migrations rather than a tourist calendar. This is exactly what keeps the village authentic even after gaining worldwide fame. As it lies above the Arctic Circle, the place faces months of total darkness in winter and endless days in summer. This phenomenon of the midnight sun and polar night influences everything from fishing times to the daily routine of the population. Although small, this community boasts one of Norway's most striking landscapes: mountains, fjords, wooden houses, and a silence typical of the far north. It is one of those villages that attract attention precisely because they were not created to impress anyone. Number 11. Aguxa, Spain. To end our trip, we return to Spain because now it's time to visit a tiny village in Galicia that has become famous for a completely unusual detail. The place has about 7 permanent residents. 7 people live there all year round. However, scattered throughout this rural area, there are 9 bars operating normally. For many people, this sounds impossible, but it makes sense when you understand the routine of the region. Twice a month, on the 11th and 23rd, the village changes its appearance. The traditional market attracts residents from several neighboring villages, creating a buzz that no small town in the area can generate. On these days, the bars that seem excessive serve hundreds of visitors and serve close to 1,000 meals. For such a small place, it is almost a surreal scene. The structure of the fair also helps to explain everything. There are the so-called pendellos, which are stone sheds lined up next to each other. They serve as shelters for stalls, typical foods, and vendors who set up shop only on market days. When the program includes regional dishes such as carne al caldero, beef stew, prepared in large pots, the flow increases even more. Another important factor is the pilgrimage route known as Via da Prata, one of the variants of the Camino de Santiago. Many hikers pass through there and find the bars a strategic place to eat, rest, and continue their journey. During the rest of the month, the village returns to its quiet pace, just a small group of rural houses surrounded by fields. But on market days, it becomes an unlikely gastronomic hub where 7 residents maintain a structure that serves hundreds of people. And that's it for today. Now tell me, which of these places impressed you the most? Tell us here in the comments. If you liked the video, leave a like, subscribe to Bello Mundo here, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next trips. Thank you for staying with us until the end. See you on the next adventure.